How about now? You should be able to hear me now. The other frame that I was trying out appeared to not be uh, to not have the right audio source. So thank you for letting me know. I will begin again, and that's fine because it's been that kind of year. Um, yeah, like I considered being more fancy with this and like I'll wear a nice button-up shirt and like maybe try to find a New Year's like hat and a noisemaker thing. But then I didn't because it's been the kind of year where it's exhausting to try to do almost anything. And I thought instead it would be more fun to, woo, wow. Prince Justin subscribed to Tier 1 for a number of months at once. That's very generous, and thank you so much. It's been lovely getting to hang out with you more here on the stream, and I'm very grateful for your support in this and in all things. It's very fun to watch, to take a look at Paul's photography anytime. So, Paul, if you want to throw in your Twitter or another place where people can find your photos, I would be very happy to point people at them since they are a thing that brings me joy. I know that you haven't been able to do as much travel, but I think you got some good stuff during the Worldcon trip, if I remember correctly. So I would invite you to share that here if you like. And yeah, I think a lot of what has made this year tolerable has been media that's been fun enough or thought-provoking enough or like engrossing enough to take me away from worrying about the world and the pandemic and all of that kind of stuff. And so I put together a list of some things that I really liked this year, and I want to talk about them a lot. Some of them are stuff that's like already pretty popular, and some of them are things that are maybe not as well known. And so yeah, I'll kind of talk through things, and I'll be very excited to hear from any of y'all who kind of had fun with any of these or wanted to talk about them with me. And then, hearing about stuff that's helped the year be better for you. Great. So, Prince Justin has shared Twitter and a website and Instagram for y'all to go and find his pictures if you would like to do that. But yeah, so I've got basically I've got categories for TV, movies, books, video games, and then like other stuff. And I'll probably move back and forth between them and be fairly freewheeling because this is not actually an award show. In future years, I might like have the fun of trying to create like award show tiles or something in like a PowerPoint, but maybe not. I don't know. This is all me just kind of figuring things out along the way because I would like to have fun and learn some things about like video production and being a better online host in terms of flow and things like that. But this is all still for fun. Like it's technically content marketing because I have my writing and that's the main thing. And then doing stuff like this is a way of being in the world and reminding people that I have writing. But mostly this is a hobby that is a way for me to spend time with people. And that's the more important thing. So this is not the Keeleys for a number of reasons. Um, I don't owe anyone anything in the video game industry, so that's a big difference. I also don't get like world premiere video trailers or whatever, and that's fine. So if any of you watch the Keeleys, you know that there's all sorts of discourse about them. It doesn't really matter. Get that gets a lull from the rising tides. Yeah, much more could be said about the Keeleys, but we need not do so here. Turn this Twitch stream into a video game. No, I don't want to become a discourse stream. Yeah, they're the Keeleys. I picked that up from the people at White Point that call them the Keeleys. It's the Game Awards, technically, hosted by Jeff Keighley. Yeah, so general life in 2021 was spent in this room largely. This is my office. This is where I try to write books, and this is where I did probably 99% of the work on the Genrenauts tabletop game that is in development. So like I can point the camera a little bit in a broader space because there's not a lot more here than you see. We go over here and there's a treadmill right there. And then we go over here and I try to not have it covered up by my hand. And there's like a bookshelf. And then there's some more bookshelves and the treadmill, like I said. So that's my life. Like we have other rooms. I don't live in like a studio where secretly my bed is over here. So, we have other space, but I spend a gigantic amount of my working and otherwise life just in this room. And I was lucky enough to be able to set up a new computer with a friend's help in I think the first weekend of March 2020, when people in the US were like, so Corona, not the beer, but a virus? Um, yeah, like I ditto original. I have not maybe used my treadmill desk as much as I would like because there are times when it's like kind of not doing what I need it to do or like beeps a lot in weird ways for reasons I don't understand. But it's a good way of varying up my working life so that I'm not just at the desk for, 12 hours a day. Like I'll get up and treadmill and internet or treadmill while I'm playing a game or treadmill while I'm any number of other things. And so that's a good part of my year. And I've had that for some time. But yeah, like early part of the year, things were really bad COVID wise. I stayed home. Meg had to be going into work in an office. And so, like, a lot of our like risk budget was just baked in because of how work had to operate for her. So we didn't do much of anything in the world. And then I was slow enough on the slow and like nervous enough in like getting back out of the world and traveling and like doing a bunch of stuff after being fully vaccinated that hot vax summer that lasted like maybe 6 or 8 weeks for some people because they got um, they got their vaccines fairly early, and this is like a lot of people in the U.S. and maybe some in Canada, um, and then had like more than a month of being able to go around in the world and do stuff while being fully vaccinated before Delta kind of became a big deal. So I didn't get as much. I got to, what did I do? My parents came to visit and we went out to a restaurant. So we ate in a restaurant inside once, and then I ate in restaurants that were outside a couple of times. Uh, and like hung out, went to a bookstore. So that was like a lot of the extent of my hot vac summer. Um, Non-motorized treadmill with incline adjustment. Interesting. Standing desk. Yeah, I've heard that standing desk plus um, kind of treadmill or adjustable treadmill suggestion. I may look I may look into that as an option if and when this treadmill desk gives up the ghost and it is no longer workable. There have been a couple times when I thought that I'd gotten to that point and then it started working again. And I'm really grateful for that because it wasn't cheap, even if replacing it will be it's expensive. If money were not an object, I'd get one of the like the pneumatic raising and lowering desks where you just push a button and it goes woo, or you push a button again, it goes woo, and so you set the heights and then you can just push a button and move them between them. Because the desk that I have, you have to like unscrew things in the back and then move the thing up, but also hold it up in place and then screw the things back in, which tends to be it tends to mean that I like hold the everything is off of it desk up with my back while I try to screw things in, because I'm usually moving it when like Meg isn't around rather than being sensible and waiting to get her assistance. I would love to see a link, original, if you want to share that in the chat. So yeah, I didn't really get to travel much. I didn't go and do cons. I know some people got out to stuff like Gen Con or Dragon Con. And it seemed like the kind of summer and late summer cons were not too bad if they had like vaccine mandate and mask mandate, and that is like that they got to have those experiences. I decided not to do them for a variety of reasons that I don't necessarily want to super go into because it's just the same life that everybody has been dealing with. Hey, kids are asleep. Yeah, and like I was already a bit nervous about Worldcon just because of how many people tend to be there and the not mask mandate in DC at the time. And then when I heard about Omicron, I just decided to make a decision earlier rather than wait and see for 2 weeks and then maybe make a decision only a few days before the con and just cancel on being there as an in-person attendee. And my whole Worldcon experience was we drive down, I get lunch with my agent, and that was a really good experience. Like, I'm very happy to have done so. Kim May is great. And then I went inside the hotel that is in Worldcon for about 10 minutes to drop off a giveaway prize and see, I think, precisely 3 additional people, um, 2 of which are often here, and one of which is Maurice Broaddus, who I've done various things with and was on the D&D Speculate 3-shot that Greg ran. So like I did not get to have much of a con experience, and I'll get back to kind of experiences in the world a little bit later. But in terms of being able to survive the year, like I have a lot of advantages and privileges, and I want to like make sure that I am clear about that because there are a lot of people in the world who had a lot fewer tools and like resources to be able to deal with things. Upside down U base, interesting. I will, I'm going to click on that link so that I have it, and then I'm not going to look at it just right now. Because at that point, then we're doing like Twitch shops or standing desks, which I suppose we could do, but I'll wait for another time. One hand, lift with hand, tighten it back up, done. One dial. That sounds pretty great. Maybe a shopping with Twitch stream later on. I know the people at MinMax, who are like a Minneapolis, St. Paul based video game outlet, had a run where they would do new shows every week. And one of the shows they did was House Hunter Rise, where basically they just trolled through Zillow listings on stream and talked with chat about them. And that sounds kind of fun, but not necessarily what I'm looking for today. Maybe that'll be later on. Yeah, so yeah, why don't I launch into some things that I liked? And I'll probably not go too long on any of these things unless some of y'all have also engaged with them and that's stuff that you like, because I talking about them with y'all is going to be more interesting than I think me just kind of going off on them in one way or another. And I think there's some stuff in here that other people have been watching, because I'm pretty sure that the Rising Tides did an episode of Skiffy and Fanty on Leverage Redemption, which I think Michi was on. So the Rising Tides, if you're still here, I have not seen all of this season of Leverage Redemption, but yes, triple exclamation mark is accurate. I watched and really enjoyed Leverage. I think I watched 3 whole seasons and then I fell off a little bit in the 4th season. Not because I wasn't liking the show, but I think just because other things in life. This is a thing that is not uncommon with me because there's so many different things to engage with that it's not sometimes hard to like finish a thing. I'm very bad at finishing video games. Kids are asleep. I think we should do a watch party sometime with the Strange Friends crew to watch some Leverage. Rising Tides, maybe you and I and anybody else who's already seen it should brainstorm a couple of episodes to share with the other Strange Friends. I think that would be pretty fun. So yeah, if you're not familiar with Leverage, Leverage is a heist/crime show, and the premise is that there are a group of 5 criminals who team up to go after really bad criminals and do Robin Hood shit for for the quote unquote the little guy. So the first episode is that they're hired by somebody at a aviation company to steal back secret plans and like blueprints for a cool new plane that a different aviation company had stolen. And then there's some twists, and at the end of the job, these like four criminals that had all been kind of brought together under the masterminding of a like insurance investigator who's basically would go after criminals because criminals would like steal stuff or there'd be fraud, and so you get an insurance adjuster and investigator to go after them. And these thieves are a like a grifter face, um, a hitter slash retrieval specialist, aka muscle, a super hacker, and hitter, hacker, grifter, thief, and the mastermind. So that's kind of how they're talked about: hitter, hacker, grifter, thief, mastermind, or the instead of mastermind, the brains sometimes. And so this show ran from like 2008 to 2014 or so, and was ahead of the curve in terms of like American media that took a fairly sharp anti-corporatist, anti-capitalist bent. I think it's more anti-corporatist than explicitly anti-capitalist. But it had a lot of like CEO abuses people's trusts, or like this person is a grifter and like steals people's houses from them by screwing them over using like arcane real estate stuff going on. And it did a lot of exposing trends and scams that people in the US and abroad and elsewhere in the world were already doing. A lot of the stuff that they found and put on Leverage was just stuff that other people in the world were doing. And it was a great way of telling and dramatizing to people, hey, here are all the ways that rich people do shitty stuff and abuse trust, exploit systems, and screw over everyday people. And so then we have this power fantasy of what if you had these kind of super thieves who would try to even the score or turn the tables on bad people. So that was already my crap. That was already my shit. Then they're off the air for 8 years, and the way that people around me and I think about politics and economics in 2014 and the way that we think about them in 2021 is very different. And it's interesting to see how people have shifted, because people are going back to the original Leverage, and now Leverage Redemption brings back most of the cast, but not everybody, and introduces a couple of new characters. And Leverage Redemption is both sillier and way more sharp in its politics. It's more explicit. It's more specific. It talks about the ways that the rich and the kind of global elite have not just cheated, not just broken the rules or bent them, but they have rewritten the rules so that those with power and money who abuse it, are protected by the systems that they have co-opted, not just they're able to move around or through those systems. That instead we have to recognize the way that they've already co-opted and corrupted and taken control of the systems, and that the systems are tools of the people with power who use them to oppress people. So I'm going to look at chat real quick because I got into a vibe. Yeah, pulling shitty stuff from the headlines and illustrating the power fantasy. Yeah, totally. Totally agree. The Rising Tides. I don't remember the written and then quietly disappeared because it was extremely a bad thing, and their government consultant was like, please do not. I don't remember. I think that I don't doubt it, because there were times when Leverage like called shots that then people would do later on. And rewatching it now, because I've been rewatching it this year with Meg, because she didn't really watch Leverage the first time through. A lot of that stuff turned out to be prescient, and then like, oh yeah, this thing that they talk about happened in a way bigger way later on. And now we have Leverage Redemption, where they're doing stuff like they're going after Bitcoin bros, and they're going after like exploitative like real estate groups and a bunch of other things that feel like they are pulled from the headlines And the funny thing about leverage is that because the world has caught up with leverage, um, it didn't have to change a lot to still be really relevant and timely and trenchant. But for whatever reasons, because the creators are who they are, and there's a new showrunner on the new show, though the kind of, I think at least one of the co-creators, John Rogers, is still involved in Leverage Redemption. They're like, okay, not enough people listened to us the first time through with leverage because look at all this terrible stuff that happened and we didn't organize to stop it, again because a lot of these systems are already corrupted and turned to the advantage of the corrupt. So let's just get louder and more explicit about all the terrible stuff that we as people have to team up and stop. um, uh, Rogers ran it by someone who's like, yes, this would work. Please don't help people by explaining it. Wow. Yeah, I that does that does ring a bell. I'll have to go and look that up. If we do a if I do like a leverage thing that is more public facing, I'll have to go and look that up. Um, yeah, like they're like Chenrazi, I agree on the like some of the power that the rich and the oligarchs and however you want to talk about the people at the top who exploit that power, a lot of it is consensus, like manufacturing consent. The idea where you deploy systems in like journalism or essay writing and op-eds where you create a narrative for people to internalize that convinces people that how power is distributed and the way things are is good or just or it's fine. Um, so that's the leverage redemption politics minute, which was like 5 or 10 minutes, but you know, you get what you come. This is who I am, and I should not try to be anyone else in terms of my politics and my anti-capitalism and how I like expressing those things through media and storytelling. So leverage redemption, it meant a lot to me this year. Um, Another show, actually, I'll go through a couple of things that are like really popular, and I don't necessarily have to say as much about them because there's a lot of ink has been spilled on them digitally, mostly digitally at this point. So never, never apologize for going off on your politics. Thank you very much, Tom. Good to see you, and welcome to the chat. Um, yeah, so uh, the Marvel show What If. I really liked What If comics when I was growing up, reading stuff in Marvel, where most of them were like one shot, like one issue stories, where it's like, what if this other person gained the power of Thor, and then it'll tell that story for like 22, 26 pages or whatever. And it makes a great format for an anthology TV show because you just get to go, okay, here's 8 different ideas, and they don't necessarily have to connect. And so for several weeks running, I was like, that's a fun idea. That's a fun idea. This one's a little slight, but it was fun to watch. Like, oh, bro, like Thor the party bro because he didn't, become more mature. And like, okay, here's Loki. And like, oh yeah, Captain Carter's really cool. There's a version of Captain Carter in an Exiles comic that Saladin Ahmed was the writer on a few years ago, and I like that. And then What If did a thing that I was not expecting the show to do, which is no, all of these matter to one another, and we're going to tie everything together into a story. And that really took the show up another level for me in terms of enjoying it. Um, Rising Tide says, my favorite episode of Leverage Redemption is the card game job because card games and the closest to what if the crew tried to get one up on Martin Shkreli by stealing his Wu-Tang album that we may ever get. Absolutely. I had not thought about the Martin Shkreli thing. That's a really good pull for that. I think that's very apt. Um, yeah, like I think I heard that things were going to get tied together before like the next to last episode that actually did those tying things together. But I was really glad to see it. I think there are some bits in that two-parter that are like a pretty heavy hand wave. They're like, okay, just go with me on this real quick so that we can get to this other thing. Um, the new Twitter genre, NFT people whose receipts were stolen. Yeah, it's beautiful. What if instead your tokens were funged? Because NFTs don't do what you think they do in a lot of ways. but most hilariously, the security way, because you own the declaration of a receipt of a thing without owning the thing, and also often the thing that you're owning the copy or the digital readout of the receipt was not yours to begin with, nor was it uh, nor did it belong to the person from whom you made the NFT thing. It's very silly. And that's like ludicrousness beyond, like, you can put the environmental stuff of blockchain entirely to the side and still go hard against NFTs because of how ludicrous they are. Um, yeah, what if I think is it's just money laundering. Yeah, I think it's very much that. Because it's like moving money out of regulatory systems, right? Where just now US legislators are, I think maybe legislators are, but I think there's also some federal side enforcement of like regulation about NFTs and blockchains stuff. Yeah. Oh, cool. I'm glad that that you liked the What If comics original. If you do get a subscription, temporarily or longer term to Disney Plus, I do think some of those What If are worth taking a look at. My favorites are probably the very first one that has Captain Carter, because like animation can do things in terms of action storytelling that are a different extension and exaggeration of what you can do in comics panels versus what you can do in live action. In live action, you have to either use CG or you have to have humans doing things humans can do on their own and or with practical effects. And so Captain Carter does stuff in that cartoon episode that you just could not ask Chris Evans to do, even with the greatest choreography team in the world. You could maybe do it with CG, but at the point where you're doing it with CG, you're probably better off doing it with animation, because I went back and rewatched the Matrix movies, and the second Matrix movie specifically has bits where the CG just did not age very well, and an NFT is especially like receipt that says you own a digital thing, yeah. But then like it's just an assertion of owning a digital thing with no enforcement, right? Which is why it's very silly. Oh yeah, I was not a huge fan of Iron Man 2. I think a fair bit of the What If things you can watch. Well, some of them you can watch without having seen the other movies, but some of them are just what if this thing from the MCU went slightly differently? So that makes it a little bit less fun if you don't know the thing that they're varying from. Um, so yeah, the Captain Carter episode, she's big, she's strong, it's very cool. I think the uh, Thor Party Bro Global Party episode is very slight but fun. And what else did I like? The zombies one wasn't bad. I think that their version of Scott Lang is pretty fun. And then I think the final two are pretty good. And so that's some fun there. I enjoyed some of the other Marvel shows this year. I think the other one that I liked the most or was the most impressed by was WandaVision, because the premise of starting off with, okay, we are doing a like family sitcom decade by decade tour with like intense genre emulation, and it's going to be a manifestation of this character's journey and like working through grief. Like that's a pretty strong sell from the beginning. um yeah, like so the Peggy Carter episode is different from the zombies stuff in the, at least the first episode is different. um yeah, I think I liked the first. I liked the genre emulation episodes of WandaVision more than I liked the more MCU finale-ish episodes. Um, I think those, especially the first three episodes, where they have kind of a rising amount of like Twilight Zone conspiracy, unprocessed grief stuff bubbling up. That Wanda's trying to like reinterpolate, react like reabsorb into this fantasy is really pretty cool. And yeah, I think I think the show and the MCU lets Wanda off pretty easy. I'm curious to see what will happen in other things when that character shows up again. Truman Show, Philip K. Dick, yeah, absolutely. I think Truman Show is definitely in the mix of like, okay, what is this overall? When people didn't necessarily know, like before the show is on and we're just seeing trailers, like, oh, okay, is this some Truman Show thing where they're trying to get Wanda to X? Um, hey, hi Trivity Mats, Happy New Year's Eve. Yeah, welcome. Just hanging out, talking about things that I enjoyed this year. And earlier on, I kind of talked through like, what was it like to live my life earlier this year? And now we're on to things that are more specifically joyful or exciting. I think Falcon and Winter Soldier had some promise and then completely screwed up the political storytelling in terms of how the Flag Smashers were handled, and it makes me frustrated enough that I'll just kind of skip ahead of that and move on to other things that are more joyful, because there's little reason for me to expect that Disney, one of the largest international mega corporations, would tolerate or in any way, shape, or form co-sign an actual leftist critique of international kind of interventionist, exploitative, neo-colonial martial politics. Like they're just not going to do that. Like the closest that I think Disney would let anyone get is Black Panther. But Black Panther, again, that movie is an example of basically the same thing, where someone makes an accurate critique of the world as it is, Killmonger, and then does a bunch of terrible things such that that critique can be thrown aside. The reason that Black Panther does better than others is that that wasn't the only critique, and that the protagonist does listen to a different critique and make some changes. And so that's better, but maybe the best that we can hope for from Marvel in the MCU. uh, yeah, zombies. They're earlier on in the run of The Walking Dead, when kind of zombie craze was at the highest. There were like they had the Nerf zombie weapons, and there was like zombie survival camp, which was basically just like exercise camps, but then they made a little bit of narrativization or just kind of a zombie survival gloss that they put on their website in order to like make a bunch more money. I'm fine, thank you. Okay. Yeah, I think the one other show that I want to shout out until I am reminded by somebody else is Arcane, which is a Netflix animated show that kind of unpacks and dramatizes the backstory of characters from Riot Games' League of Legends. And like, I don't do anything with League of Legends. Like, I don't play it. I have not been necessarily a fan of Riot because there's been a lot of reporting about very, very bad working conditions, and the leadership and like executives at Riot just like not protecting workers. But this show Arcane, which is made in co-op like with Riot, but by an animation company called Fortiche in France, this show is really good. And I knew basically nothing about League of Legends beforehand and got a ton out of the show. So I don't feel like it's something where it's only fun for people who already know the source material. The basic rundown of Arcane is that there's a there's basically a twin city where it used to be one city, but really now it's two cities. There's kind of middle and upper class kind of industry and emerging like magic technology city over here. And then over here you have like a subterranean slash living in the crevasses where gas from like mining accidents coming up. So you get the kind of the literal undercity overcity vibe. And some of the main characters are a pair of sisters who live in the undercity, whose parents died during a failed uprising where people were basically trying to force the overcity that has all the like weapons and power and stuff into treating the people of the undercity better. And then there's also a plot about like magic technology and things. And it's got very good action. It uses music really well. It's the most I've liked what is that band? Imagine Dragons the most I've liked Imagine Dragons music in some time. Like it's become fairly popular to like rag on them. I think they do some good stuff, and here it works very nicely. Um, yeah, like uh, I agree with Prince Justin. Like I think enough people that I've seen and my own experience has said that League of Legends lore is not necessary for enjoying Arcane. And so basically, the first three episodes are a really nicely dramatized prelude or prologue, and then the rest of the what 9 or 10 episodes are this really cool story about the tensions between and within these two cities. It's got a very cool mixed 2D and 3D art style where it's 3D art, but on the canvas of the 3D figures, it looks like 2D painted art where there you can see the individual brushstrokes, and that combination is a little uncanny, but mostly just really cool. And so I think the show kind of came under a lot of people's radar because it had that League of Legends association, and um, League of Legends is super popular, but it's not popular in a distributed, highly marketed to everybody else way that something like Wheel of Time or like MCU stuff is. Like there's a lot of video games that are just absolutely phenomenally popular and economic juggernauts, but don't have basically zero broader pop culture awareness. Um, I think if you looked at like Wheel of Time, the Wheel of Time show versus Arcane, the broader pop culture awareness, specifically in like the kind of traditional Worldcon fandom circles, that Arcane did not have the fan oomph coming into it because the League of Legends fans are not in those spaces. Not that they don't exist, there's a ton of them. It's just a bit different. So Arcane is the other thing I want to shout out. This is where I ask y'all who are watching if there are other shows that you really enjoyed this year, especially if it's something that maybe you think went under the radar or is not as well known. I would love to hear the things that you really liked and would love to shout out. I'm going to take a quick sip here. I did go into my settings and turn ads off. I left on the you can put an ad at the bottom thing, but I don't know that I can have it set. I don't know that I can have the channel set that it will only do those bottom ads. That I would be okay with because it doesn't actually interrupt the flow. But from what I can see, that's not an option for me at this point. If it is, I'd love to hear about it, especially if you have a link that you can send me versus trying to talk me through at this point. Vanguard Saga of Heroes. World art was made by Keith Parkinson, who did a lot of 2D art, and EverQuest. Tech wasn't even close then. That's a bummer. The way, like, given how frequent and how common remakes and reboots are at this point, I would not be too surprised. 15, okay, 15-second ad. Is that a pre-roll ad? Like you clicked on the channel and it gave you an ad and then you got to start watching Triffity Mats? I think that's fairly common. I don't know if I get revenue for those. I don't know that I can turn them off. If I can figure out how to turn them off, I may do so. But I'm very used to that type of pre-roll ad when I'm watching other stuff. So that may just be the way of things. Andromeda, I have not gone back to watch Andromeda. I think I maybe watched 1 or 2 episodes when it was first on. I've heard some good things about it, like, oh, okay, it does some stuff with this concept that people have been talking about later on. But I've not taken the time to go and look at Andromeda. Leverage has been the happily not zero brain power, but it has its own formula and moves at a nice clip versus something like watching like Succession or like a really heavy HBO drama. I just have not been super into that vibe in general over the last most of a decade, and especially not during the pandemic. 3%, yeah, I keep hearing people recommend 3%. I think it's on Netflix in the US. It's a Brazilian show, and I maybe watched a tiny bit of the first episode. I need to give it a real go to see if it's something I can get into. I did watch one episode of Squid Game to have a little bit of a sense of um, what, like, okay, what is Squid Game other than like I wanted to have a more nuanced understanding of it than this is a South Korean Hunger Games slash battle royale, because like, it's not just that, and the cultural context is important, but like, okay, it's doing its own individual things, and it's got specific characters who are who emerge from specific cultural and economic contexts in terms of like what South Korean life is like as expressed by this creator. Um, it's kind of more grim than I would hope for, because like if I were writing Squid Game, like somewhere in episode 4 or 5, there's just a mass revolt and it turns into a revolution, which I don't think that show does. I'm not going to spoil it. I do know how it ends, but I don't know all the details along the way. I think having a bunch of different stuff like Squid Game or Battle Royale, like that could be really effective, especially not just exporting a bunch of American or like if all of the dystopian narratives that get any amount of attention around the world are from the US, the UK, or Canada, like that's leaving out the lived experience of a whole of the overwhelming majority of the world. So I would like to see more like dystopian narratives that express the specific cultural context and perspectives of people from all over the world. Wheel of Time. Yeah, Wheel of Time was on my list of things to talk about. I didn't dwell on it because it's fairly popular. I have not watched the very last episode of the season because I've been watching it with Meg and a friend of ours who is in Indiana, and who kind of was not able to, we weren't able to meet up this week. I read the first Wheel of Time book, Eye of the World, but it was like 20 years ago now. So I don't have a lot of memory. I have like ambient knowledge of Wheel of Time from the ether because I have a lot of friends in high school who really loved Wheel of Time, and so they talk about it a bunch. And I learned many things about the series without having to have read it. Um, I'm curious whether the last episode of Wheel of Time will do this, will fix this. But in watching Wheel of Time, I really like Train to Busan Chenrazi. I would definitely second that recommendation. Um, in Wheel of Time, when male characters channel, the way the show expresses it is there's like white wispy stuff, and then like icky black stuff eats it, and then it turns into black wispy stuff. And I don't know how that is supposed to line up with the cosmology of the world as it is expressed in the show or the book. Because the book continuity says the big bad tainted boy magic. And for reasons that are the author's, magic is two pools that emerge from the same source, and the corruption can't go down to the bottom and then come back up. So only boy magic is tainted. People in the show, so Red Aja, people in the show blame it on the menness, not on the source being corrupted. But I don't think the books bear up that argument, nor do other perspectives or arguments from magic users elsewhere in that setting, like in season 1. Like the rest of the Aes Sedai seem to be on the source is tainted and that's the problem side. But the way that the visual semiotics of the show would indicate that the stuff, that there's something, that whatever that icky stuff is corrupting white magic, and then it turns into corrupted magic. And I don't understand how that's supposed to work. The source is already corrupted, and women draw on the white wispy magic. So why is it the same white wispiness that then gets turned black? That doesn't make sense to me. It may turn into an essay that I send to like Tor.com or something. I need to watch last episode to make sure that that symbolic language has not changed. But that's just something that I noticed while watching Wheel of Time. I think it makes a lot of good adjustments, especially in casting and making the world more diverse. It definitely skips over stuff and like moves faster. It broadens the camera's view so that these five characters are like the protagonists in a bigger way than the book did. And I think the gender relationships, specifically the within the binary, like the way that the men and the women from Two Rivers relate to each other, is better in the show than what I remember of the books. And Meg kind of bears this up as well. US remakes of other shows that were worthwhile. US remakes. I think for me, a US remake will need to turn something American and not try and find something interesting to say with that same premise, rather than just Americanizing the same thing without doing anything new. Um, the Office, yeah, I think UK to US remakes are probably easier um, in some ways, but not necessarily others, because two countries separated by the same language and some history. We'll see if folks have other thoughts about US remakes. Some folks already talked a little bit about movies. We're already at almost 2, so I'm going to move through those a little bit faster because I'm more interested in spending time on books and video games and kind of other experiences. Because like books are an area where I can have more of a direct impact on like people finding things that they will enjoy, and those people then getting money and hopefully getting new book deals or being able to sustain their career by selling books, versus the scale of TV and movies that's just so much more gigantic. I just watched Matrix Resurrections, whatever, the first or second day that it was available. I was a big Matrix fan the first time through. I loved the Animatrix. I liked the second movie. I was really let down by the third movie at the time, and I've not really gone back to it. I've rewatched the second movie and most of the Animatrix, but not the end of Revolutions, so I don't know for sure on that one. But I did really like Matrix Resurrections. Understanding that WB was going to make a new Matrix movie with or without the Wachowskis. And so Lana said, no, you don't get to make this without me. So I'm going to be involved and use this to do what I want, to say something that I want to say about the Matrix and about society since then. So I'm really glad to have it along those lines. I think the central relationship that was used to frame the story is like a good idea. And there's a way in which Lana got WB to put up millions upon millions of dollars for her to write fix it fic of her own earlier work with her sister, and that's pretty amazing. I was not as impressed by the action stuff in Resurrections. I think the new like world building status quo is really interesting, and it made me want to play tabletop RPG stories in the Matrix setting, and so that's always a plus for me. I was expecting to see like hacks of various things to play Matrix things, but I've not seen them bubble up. Maybe there already were some that I just didn't notice because I wasn't looking for them in years past. I think you could do a decent Matrix game using Forge in the Dark, but that's the design school that I'm the most familiar with now because it's the one that I'm using to design a game. You can probably do it with other things too. I don't know whether they were twins. I would have to go and look that up. Maybe other folks who are watching know whether they are identical or fraternal twins, or whether they are kind of sisters of a non-twin variety. So yeah, I think probably the two movies that I like the most this year that people are least likely to have heard of are The Mitchells versus the Machines, which is I think on Netflix and was done by some of the same team that did the Lego movie, like the Lord and Miller kind of greater comedy team. And this is like a fun family adventure where they fight robots, but it also displays a fairly toxic family dynamic that could really turn some people off. So I liked it because that dynamic did not turn me off of the story, but I understand that there's going to be a fair number of people who for whom it is a problem. And to kind of describe it as broadly as I can without getting into details that like could be unnerving or unsettling or triggering to people. Basically, you've got two members of the family who are always at loggerheads, and two members of the families that are kind of trying to smooth things over. And the way that they smooth things over also kind of leads to enabling or co-signing what like the bad behavior that these two are doing toward one another, and or they're just doing other stuff that's not actually healthy because it's not resolving problem. It's just kind of pushing problems to the side in the like in the interest of preserving an idea of like a working family. And then that dynamic gets better um, toward the end of the movie, and there's fun action and good comedy. The last one that I want to shout out is Space Sweepers, which is a where was that movie made? It's on Netflix, and it's a Korean production company. I'm gonna find what's the name of that production company. Um, Bidang Gil Pictures and Dexter Studios, distributed by Netflix, directed by Jo Sung-hee, written by Yoon Sung-min, Yu Kang Sae, and Jo Sung-hee. So that was a really fun science fiction movie. Okay, Prince Justin says Skippy and Fanty did an episode on it. You can go check that out to hear why they really liked it. For me, this is a movie in the style of like Killjoys or Cowboy Bebop or Firefly. You have kind of down on their luck spacers who end up in a way bigger story than the scale of their life had been previously. And the way that that story unfolds kind of develops or exposes or challenges the like characterization or backstory of the various people in the story. And it does a good job of being one of those and looks amazing in terms of like how good the CG is. And it plays with the idea that at a certain point, space trash is going to become a huge impediment to space travel. And then just like that's where you start. Like, oh, these people are space sweepers. They go and pick up space trash so that space travel can continue. But then more things happen and they get caught up in something way bigger, and it's fun. So I would definitely recommend that. I mean, yeah, it's good to know what you like. So if some part of Space Super sounds interesting to you, maybe give it a shot. If it sounds like things you don't like, then maybe don't. Um, so I'm going to start talking about books, but would also be happy to hear from y'all on other movies that you liked. If anybody has recommendations of documentaries for Arudinel, that might be handy. I don't tend to watch a lot of documentaries, so I don't have good recommendations, unfortunately. All right. 1 hour of things already. So many stuff, so many things to talk about, and lots of people here chatting, which has been very fun. So, books I liked this year. I'm going to start with something that probably most other people didn't read because it's a contemporary romance and not science fiction, but it is geeky. It is a book called Strength Check by Catherine McIntyre, which is the first of, I think, two written, but only the first one is published, and there's going to be at least two more. A romance series called Dungeons and Dating, which it does what it says. And so the like part of the core cast of this series is the people who own and run a gamer bar. So it's game store and a bar and restaurant. And so the first book is about one of the co-owners and then her new roommate who like moves to San Francisco looking to kind of start her life over because she got a big promotion in the same company but in a different part of the country. And so it is a roommates to lovers kind of romance. It is very sweet. It's like the romance emerges from and alongside the friendship between these two women, where it's not that it's like, okay, it's not like instant chemistry and they sleep together and then things are complicated. It's much more these two people get to know each other. There's always been chemistry. They, for whatever reasons, have not made the move of like trying to figure out if they want their relationship to be romantic and sexual, or if they would like the relationship to be a friendship and not either of those things. And it does a good job of being the type of book that it is in terms of a somewhat comedic contemporary romance. It doesn't necessarily do a lot in terms of like hard hitting social issue stuff, but there is some good emotional material that the book kind of digs up and deals with in terms of how these people think about themselves and how their expectations about who they are and what they do and don't deserve informs the way that they try to relate to other people. So I'm looking forward to the next books in that series. The next one I think is Wisdom Check, and it's due in like late January. The other book that kind of many of the folks I know maybe have not heard of, and this is because it's a self-published book, is something called Iron Prince, which is by Bryce O'Connor and Luke Chimlenko. That's Chmilenko for Chimlenko. And this is what my friend Carl calls a progression fantasy. I think that's the term that's kind of very popular in the self-pub world. And so in this, you have a far future science fiction-y society of humans that has been fighting against some alien civilization for, I think, decades, maybe generations. And so they have this military that is fighting against the aliens. And the military is entirely funded by the proceeds from the pro super tech MMA league that the military runs using military enlisted people and officers. So you enlist, and if you qualify at a certain level, you get joined with like a super machine that then kind of gives you like power armor, hyper martial arts superpowers. And a fair number of the people with those devices then fight in a MMA league where the wounds are not permanent. Instead, it's like science fiction interface so that they're really fighting, but the damage they inflict on each other is not permanent. And what this is, like, overall, this just creates a narrative and world building justification to have like a zillion fight scenes. So the book has a ton of fight scenes, and my standards for fight scenes in fiction, because I focus on them in my own writing, I'd say my standards are fairly high. Like, I ask more of these. And for a book that is about 850 pages and has a zillion fight scenes, I was pretty consistently impressed by what the fight scene was doing at any given time. At any given moment, one of these fight scenes was justifying itself by developing character, exposing character, advancing the overall plot, introducing new details that were important and would show up later on. And so it's like fun science fiction-y fight scenes, and there's some other stuff going on. The romance element in the book, I would say, is not super impressive, especially to anyone who reads romance novels, but it's a very small part of it that I wanted to be a bigger part of the book, and it's got other stuff going on, and that's fine. It's supposed to be book one in a series that will go on for some amount of time, question mark. The first book came out more than a year ago, and I haven't heard anything about when the second book is coming out, but the first one is 850 pages, so it might take you a little while to get through. Books that are a little bit more in like that are in the traditional science fiction fantasy wheelhouse that I really liked include The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. This is a kind of anti-colonialist fantasy that, if you liked the Powder Mage books from a few years ago, is kind of in that same vibe, like the kind of gunpowder fantasy situation. The fantastical elements are not really, I wouldn't call it like magic forward. It's really politics and colonialism and culture forward, where the main character is from a civilization that's kind of somewhat analogous to like different North African civilizations, who was stolen from her home and then raised to be like a frontline soldier in the army of a colonialist power. It's kind of based on France. And so she and her whole, like, hundreds of people group who are all kidnapped kids from this North African somewhat analog country, and then trained and indoctrinated into this kind of into empire and into this colonial mindset, are then sent back to that country. And that culture shock, the double culture shock of being taken away and then returned to your home that is no longer your home. Yeah, I haven't read The Thousand Names, but I would definitely get that comparison. And I think The Unbroken is incredibly strong at showing how setting informs character, and characters react to setting, and how plot can emerge from setting in a really powerful fashion without having to basically just like rain down plot points out of nowhere on your characters. You can really set up a world that is rife with tensions and then just push over one domino and think through the ways that all of these things would kind of flow into and out of and back and forth on one another. So that's The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke, out this year. I think it was a paperback original, so it shouldn't be too hard. Like, it's not $27 to buy. It's like 17 US. It's going to be different depending on where in the world you are. Another one I liked was Savage Bounty by Matt Wallace. This is a second in series. And disclaimer, like, I know Matt from a number of years ago. We are friendly. I did a stream with CL Clarke, but only after I had already read the book. And I think CL and I are in one or another like online spaces together, but not especially close. Still very much an acquaintance. Matt, I know better. And Savage Bounty, let's see, how do I explain this without doing spoilers? So there's kind of a run up in the first book that sets up a situation where you've got a woman who is leading a intensely outnumbered but very scrappy and underestimated revolutionary force. And so a lot of the book is that force having achieved one big victory, figuring out how to not just like instantly flame out in fighting against a overwhelmingly powerful empire. And then the other parts of the book are people who are enmeshed in that empire in a couple of different ways, coming to understand more about how this empire constructed itself and erased the bloody history that led to it, and then try to figure out what to, like, okay, now we know more about how this came to be, and maybe we have some feelings about that. What are we going to do about it when so much power and time and energy has been put into retconning all of history to create this perfect narrative about why this empire is amazing? Cool. Recommendation on a documentary about Washington from Rudinell. Interesting. Yeah, that looks cool. And then the last book. May I ask if your education in authoring novels has somewhat limited your ability to enjoy popular fiction, i.e., if you read a novel that has a popular story but it's not technically great, can you enjoy it despite its shortcomings, or does your brain critique it as you read the novel? Sometimes my critique brain does kick in. I've worked myself toward being able to enjoy things more on their own terms as much as possible. So I read books this year that I would say, in terms of craft, most of the elements of craft are average or below average, but they had one or two things that they did that was really strong, and that was able to pull me through. And sometimes I'm not looking for a book to challenge me. Sometimes I am looking for something that will just do what it says and do it pretty well. And I don't necessarily need to be wowed by the prose or like totally engrossed by really intricate world building. It just does a good job of telling a story. So I think that being an author probably makes me more able to articulate what I am and am not enjoying about a book. And it definitely informs my expectations and what I look for from books. But what I've tried to do is come to understand that I'm not always looking for the same thing when I'm reading, because I like I read as a reader sometimes, and sometimes I can or can't or have an easier or harder time not also reading as a writer. And so there are books that I read because I've heard about what they do in terms of craft. Um, so another book I read this year that is not from this year, excuse me, that was really impressive is Jade City by Fonda Lee, the first um, in that series. And the world building is amazing, and the characters are really strong, and there's like solid action scenes, and it's a different type of modern fantasy that I'm not as familiar with in terms of like what has been done and what I've experienced, and that was really fun. So I got to appreciate the craft of that book as I was reading it, because I was like, oh wow, this is really fun, and like just enjoying it as a fellow writer while still chugging along and enjoying it as a reader. We got a shout out for Winter's Orbit by everyone Maxwell, Evelina Maxwell. Okay. Um, yeah, I think that's probably a solid comp for Aria and for the Eva Innocente books. So thank you for suggesting that, recommending that, Trivia Mats. And Original has more cool stuff about like the building construction of the pyramids and ramps, and uh, things we maybe learned in school not being accurate based on more recent historical information, which is cool. Um, so yeah, Savage Bounty. I also liked Jade City, but it's a little bit older. And the last book I want to shout out, I have to give the biggest disclaimer to, because the two authors are have been friends with have been friends of mine since like 2002, 2003, and that is The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. M.A. Carrick is a two-person pseudonym for Marie Brennan and Alyssa Helms, both of which I was in a writing group with from the years about probably 2003 to 2005 or thereabouts. So like they are long-term friends. I'm definitely biased, but I feel like I have pretty good taste, and the book is amazing. If you liked the Court of Blades one shot that I did that C.L. Clark was in, or you like something like the BBC Three Musketeers, or you like costume dramas with an emphasis on costumes, then check out Mask of Mirrors. It is set in kind of like a Venice-ish kind of pseudo-European city with incredibly lush world building, specifically in terms of like costuming and textiles and materials, because both Marie and Alyssa do costuming, and so they bring that expertise. Yeah, so +1 on Mask of Mirrors from Prince Justin. I feel like the the aesthetic overlap between Prince Justin and me, Mask of Mirrors is like smack dab in the middle there in terms of what stuff we look for. It's got solid action, a lot of intrigue, good romance, the really phenomenal world building. Um, so I have the second book, but I have not gotten to dive into it because the first one came out in January, and then the second in the series came out, I think, at the very end of November. The second one is The Liar's Knot. Um, so the kids are asleep. Thrifty Mats was recommending Winter's Orbit and suggesting that people who liked the Eva Innocente books or Aria might like it. So we are continuing my ongoing quest to shout out your books as often as is possible, so that the Strange Friends can take over publishing. So, anything else book-wise? Nothing else is coming to mind. It doesn't mean I didn't read other things that I really liked, but I'm going to go ahead and move on. Um, yeah, You Sexy Thing does look neat. I've taught a couple of classes for Cat's Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers, and Cat is fun people. Yeah, I do. As Told by Things. Interesting. I haven't heard of that one. Yeah, I read Icarus earlier because I got to read it early for a blurb to help Greg kind of sell that in. But I could not tell you when that official release on Icarus was because time is very wibbly wobbly. So now that we are at 2:18, that's the time is whatever. I may go a little bit after 3 or maybe not. I think if we time things correctly, then we can help the Rising Tides kick off their channel with a raid and just send people over there to keep the fun going. If you are still planning on streaming at about 3 Eastern, the Rising Tides. Twitch hits sexy thing. Oh, that's very funny. Twitch's filters are not necessarily the best, let's say. So, video games. I'm going to not talk about the obvious one first, because I've already talked a lot about it on stream. The Rising Tide says, come hear me have opinions about the costume choices at this year's Kohaku Utagassen. The obvious one is Inscription Chenrazi, which I played all of on stream. I did, I think, 10 streams total with Inscription that kind of took me all the way through the game. So I'm going to talk about Black Book by Morteshka, and that's Morteshka. I'm just going to put this into chat to make it easy for people to keep track of. And this is a deck builder, but not a roguelike, I believe. And it's a fairly small game from a fairly small studio. And in it, you play a witch who was basically trained in like the folk magical tradition of a version of like late imperial Russia. So you have this woman who's raised by like kind of a magic user. I forget exactly. A Koldun is the term. But she didn't want to like kind of go all the way and become like basically make the deals necessary to kind of do this as her whole living. And then her beloved dies, and she goes ahead and kind of becomes a full-fledged witch because she wants to break the 7 seals necessary to go to hell and fight the devil to get her beloved back. So you've got the kind of pseudo Cupid and Psyche vibe, but this game is like top to bottom soaked through with and emerges from Russian folklore. So you get Leshies, Vodyanoi, you get Chorts, like all sorts of Russian folkloric creatures from specifically like, oh, okay, this is like the folklore and mythology of even pre-Christian Russia in some areas. And so there's a lot of Eastern European cultural material that is treated and like shared and utilized in this game, which is pretty fun because often when I think about European fantasy, when people are talking about European fantasy, what they're talking about is Western European or Northern European fantasy, as opposed to Eastern European fantasy. And probably the most globally popular Eastern European fantasy is The Witcher from Poland. So this has some overlap with it because regional folklore. And the play of the game has some elements that look like Slay the Spire, where basically you have options of where to go on your path as you're doing an individual. The promise of Russian lore, gender swapped Orpheus and Eurydice. Yeah, it's pretty cool, and it's got some good side characters like your various familiars that you find and kind of bring in are interesting, and it does some twists with kind of characters and motivations that I'll kind of not spoil. And it's got a fun art style that reminds me a bit of the game Ashen from a couple of years ago that was like a sort of a Souls-like from a really smaller studio, or maybe a little bit like Absolver. And it is a deck builder in that your magic, basically your spell book is a deck of cards. and every given turn you draw so many cards, and then you have slots that you can play them into that do attack and defense, and add status effects and get rid of status effects, and you have enemies, and like that part of it plays a lot like something like Slay the Spire. And the Rising Tides has thrown a link into the chat, so you can check that out at www.mooseman.ru/blackbook.html. And I found it just on the Steam store. I think there's a demo on Steam, and that's how I checked it out first and decided that I want to get it. And I played it on PlayStation because Meg did a lot of Russia stuff, and so it was fun to be able to share something that's like overlaps with her academic background. And she got to like tell me more context on things that the game didn't necessarily give as much context on. It does do a pretty good job of contextualizing some of the folklore. So that was a pretty fun experience, and I like recommending it because I think it does some interesting stuff while not, but it didn't necessarily make a huge splash. It didn't have a big marketing budget. So Chenrazi, you should check out Chilling Effect by Valerie Valdez, aka The Kids Are Asleep. I think the Eva Innocente books are closer to that than Aria is, because of the disposition of the crew. So I'm just going to throw that in the chat. And there's 2 books in the series out, with a 3rd one coming soon. I don't remember exactly when it's coming out. Kids Are Asleep, you're welcome to plug that 3rd one. Yeah, so I just put it into the chat. It should show up right after your last, I guess for me, it's between your 2 posts, Chanrazi. So there you are. And what am I thinking about? Okay, other games. I'm still playing Fights in Tight Spaces by Ground Shatter. I really like it. It's a roguelike deck builder. Greg can make fun of me as much as he wants to about me having like a thing that I get really into. I liked this one because the tactical combat stuff and the look are really distinct and help it feel like not just another roguelike deck builder that does exactly the same thing as like Slay the Spire. So I'm happy that it's got a daily challenge mode. I still have not beaten it, so there's a lot of opportunity. Well, like he played it, he tried it out and liked it. I think it's totally understandable that Greg makes fun of me for playing a lot of roguelike deck builders because it's accurate. But I'm glad that he seemed to enjoy his time with the game as well. We got a shout out for Nofek Gloss by Essa Hansen for the same prompt, Chenrazi, and that's typed into chat as well. All right, other games. I really liked Death's Door, which is made by Acid Nerve, I think also published by Devolver Digital, who published a number of other things that I really liked. So Death's Door it's more like a Metroidvania plus a Zelda. It's isometric kind of action game, but you play as a crow who works for basically the Bureau of Death, where your job is to go and reap souls and then send them to their kind of great beyond reward. And you are sent to kind of take care of a big soul that refuses to kind of pass on, make the normal transition to death. But when you capture this big soul, another crow, and you play as literally a crow, like, ambling around on your claws, but you then use your wings to like fight with weapons and things. Another crow steals that great soul and tells you, okay, I need to open this big door, Death's Door, because of story reasons that they tell you. So you need to go and capture these 3 great souls, and then we can open this door and this good thing will happen. And so there's a fun there's this it's still kind of like a isometric, very colorful, nicely animated world. It's got a fun visual style. The action is pretty solid. There's different ways you can upgrade your like strength and hit points and the magic that you do, because you get a couple of different magic abilities as well as other things that kind of do the Metroidvania part of like opening up parts of this big map. And it's got a really fun sense of humor. There's a couple of levels that are a good combination of level design and like that there's comedy in the level design and with the characters that you're interacting with. there's a character in kind of the like town that you can go and visit that's like a little bit of a hub area, but not especially, because there's also the bureau is a hub area. Um, there's a restaurateur in the hub town that is just an octopus that has grabbed the basically grabbed the corpse of a human and is animating, is like moving the corpse of the human around like a puppet and pretending to be a person. And it's not gross so much as it is very funny and silly. And so it's got some good like cartoony comedy vibes, and there's some interesting stuff going on in the world building in terms of like why are things the way they are, and kind of coming to understand that the story you've been told as like a kind of rank and file um, crow reaper, that where you're supposed to like basically move souls along, that comes from a specific set of like historical circumstances that are informed by various people trying to get what they want out of the world. And I'll just kind of leave it there. Um, there's kind of a Sigmire equivalent character for the folks who are Souls fans, in terms of a companion character who pops up over the course of the game, and you have to help out, who is very fun. We've got a shout out from Prince Justin for Valheim. I've not gotten into Valheim, but I know people really like it for the social stuff. I think you do those over with Sean at Alphabet Streams. Is that right? I think that is. I don't remember exactly. If you want to throw, if you want to toss the address of Alphabet Streams in the chat as well, then people may be able to check that out if they're interested in looking at Valheim. Okay, so I played a couple of other things that are not from this year, but I'm going to save them for my other stuff thing, because that's probably going to be easier to talk about them then. So now I will talk at not too much length about Inscription, and that's by Daniel Mullins Games and published again by Devolver Digital. And for folks who are in and out of the stream, we've got twitch.tv/alphabet streams is where you can find those Valheim streams with Prince Justin and Sean Duke, who with The Rising Tides is the co-host, the two main co-hosts of the Skiffy and Fanty show that I'm on very intermittently as a guest host. So Inscription. I first saw Inscription during the Devolver Digital showcase over the summer, and it's like, okay, it's got some vibes. It looks like it's sort of doing like a Slay the Spire-ish roguelike deck builder thing, and that's really up my alley. I'm not a huge horror fan, but this looks pretty cool. And it came out, I heard that it had come out, I think, from people talking about it on Waypoint Radio. I went and played the demo and then instantly grabbed the game and started playing it on stream. So my whole run of that beginning of save to credits, I'm done, quote unquote, theoretically done with the main story. Did all of that on stream. Did not play it off stream, just played it on stream. So almost all of what I have to say about it is on those videos that you can find on YouTube. I think that's going to be, if I do schedule, it'll give the YouTube, yes, youtube.com/c/Mike Underwood is where my Twitch stuff shows up on YouTube 24 hours after the stream ends. I've been listening to other people talk about Inscription since finishing the game, and it's funny that despite all the time I spent with it, there's definitely stuff in Inscription that I missed, a little bit of stuff from the second act. And then I think I finished the game in such a rush that not necessarily all of the stuff in the like last sixth or last tenth of the game stuck with me as much. So I'm going to be interested to watch the rest of Waypoint's run, where they did very much a maximalist run of Inscription, where they had two people playing. They did absolutely everything they could to like never lose a match, never falter. They talked through everything like ad nauseum. So it's a very funny, different way of playing the game. Whereas I play, like, I was talking with everybody, but I tended to play the card game part somewhat aggressively, because I came to understand quickly that that losing wasn't necessarily a bad thing, that the story did move forward in the tradition of stuff like Hades or other roguelikes, where part of the meta progression is a narrative meta progression, where the game unfolds over the course of these repetitions. And that's really fun. So, Inscription is going to be my game of the year because the year is now over. And while I am enjoying Guardians of the Galaxy from Eidos, I think it's Eidos Montreal, the PlayStation Guardians of the Galaxy. It's not in the MCU, though it has a lot of the same vibes as the gun movies in the MCU. But I think Inscription impressed me and felt like it innovates in ways that were really exciting and were resonant for me as someone who's been playing card games um, since Magic the Gathering. I started playing Magic the Gathering when the Dark um, expansion came out, which is like shortly after Legends or Chronicles. So I first started playing Magic a long time ago, and then I've kind of been in and out of Magic and mostly out of it for the last, I don't know, 15 years or so. I occasionally pop into Arena and get into it again for like 2 months. But then I moved on and played a zillion other collectible card games. Basically, if there was a collectible card game in the late 90s and let's say up until about 2005 that had decent distribution in the US, I probably played it because I worked at a game store from the year 2000 up till September 2005 when I went off to grad school. And so new stuff would come in, I'd check it out, I'd play it with people, and I just played a zillion of those games. And then when roguelike deck builders became popular in the video game space with like Slay the Spire and the stuff that followed it, I played a bunch of those. And so I came to Inscription with a lot of experience and ideas about why deck builder games are interesting and what I want from deck builder games. And Inscription was a great game to have a dialogue with as a person who likes and really enjoys and thinks a lot, I guess, relative to the general population about deck builder games and what they do and don't do, what you can expect from them. And so yeah, Inscription totally rocked my world. I was absolutely delighted. I had an amazing experience sharing it with folks here on the channel, and I'm really glad to have that kind of captured in this version that you can enjoy in the VODs. I know that there's a kind of an endless roguelike mode that's being made as a mod called Casey's mod, and I may go back to that, and then maybe I'll just mostly play that offline. I don't know if I necessarily want to do another half a dozen streams of it because I think it maybe won't hit as hard as getting to go through that main story, but maybe it will. I don't know. I have not installed that mod because it's currently just in a beta branch, and I think I'm fine to just wait, let them finish it off, and then I'll engage with the thing when it's done because I've got lots of other games to play. And I'm fine. I'm really happy with my experience of Inscription as is, and I'm fine letting that kind of letting it breathe and letting the year wrap. And that if I'm going to have another experience with Inscription, it can be another experience with Inscription, more like it's an expansion. And that'll be cool. So now I'm going to talk about like broader stuff in the year. Some of it's video gaming and some of it's not. In the early months of the pandemic, there was a chunk of time when Meg was like not in the office. And so she was at home and played a lot of Bloodborne, the FromSoft game that is like the kind of gothic horror action game. And we played a little bit of Bloodborne. I'd gotten it with a PlayStation 4 a few years previous, and probably like a year or two after it came out. But before either of us had really engaged much with Soulsborne games. So Soulsborne or Souls-like, the game company From Software released a game called Demon Souls, and then a game called Dark Souls. And Dark Souls is the one that really took off. And these are games that are like dark fantasies, mostly they're like, it's a Japanese company, but they're using and drawing in from influence from European/Western fantasy. So knights and castles and like wizards and that kind of stuff in the European mode rather than like a Japanese mode. And these are games where dying and coming back and dying and like this kind of repetition and learning through dying and finding more out about the world and exploration and learning about the lore through like items and cryptic storytelling. And like at first glance, when I heard about Demon Souls, it didn't seem like my kind of game. And then Dark Souls became popular and it still didn't seem like my kind of game. And then, other games here and there, and people talked about Bloodborne. Really, the Soulsborne that I first engaged with in a meaningful fashion was Hollow Knight by Team Cherry, um, because it is both a Souls-like and a Metroidvania. And I played a lot of Metroidvanias in terms of like side-scrolling action games where there's a big map that you need to unlock upgrades to be able to like move around the map and retread places you've already been in. I played a lot of those games dating all the way back to like Super Metroid, and various Castlevania games. So I think that format was easier for me, and I loved the art style. So I played that, and then I watched Natalie Watson at Waypoint play through all of Bloodborne, and watching her learn what people like about Bloodborne and internalizing that and becoming excited about that, I think sold me on, or that it helped me understand what people see in Soulsborne games or Souls likes enough that my heart was open to the possibility. And then Meg played a bunch of Bloodborne last summer. Kids Are Asleep says, husband has been playing Axiom Verge again. It's cool. I think I have Axiom Verge, at least the first one. Is there a sequel to Axiom Verge 2? Did that come out this year? Or am I thinking of something else? I think I have one of them on Steam, from something at some point. So yeah, Meg played Bloodborne last summer and I watched her play a lot. I played a little bit of Bloodborne, and then our PlayStation died. Like the PS4 we had just, I managed to resurrect it, but we lost all the saves, like all the data was gone, and then it died again another month later. And so from like, I don't know, July of last year until probably April or May this year, we just didn't have a PlayStation at all because the PS5 was going to come out and I didn't want to spend $300 on a PS4 to then spend another $500 on a PS5, because I knew enough of the games that PlayStation does that are exclusives are the type of games that I enjoy. So I knew I wanted to get a PS5. And then that became way easier because we knew that when we got a PS5, we would then be able to go back and play all those PS4 games. So the PS5 was also a PS4 replacement. But it meant that there was this chunk of time we couldn't play any of those games. But Dark Souls Remastered came out on the Switch, and the Switch we have works just fine. So we got Dark Souls, and then Meg and I played together. Like we each had our own saves, but we kind of traded tips and got to see each other exploring the various bits of the world and talked about the lore together, and like had this experience together of playing one of these Souls-like games after she'd played Bloodborne a lot. So she came in with more knowledge about how this design style works experientially, and I had a different set of experience with video games and things. And then we got to enjoy and come to appreciate the game together. So yeah, The Rising Tide says Axiom Verge 2 is out and kind of cheap on the Epic Store right now, with a link that is in the chat. Thank you, The Rising Tides. So yeah, like the last year and a half, or almost, I guess, year and a half at this point, has been a journey of like the soulsification of our household, where like we both got into this type of games. And so we played Dark Souls Remastered, and then when we got the PS5, we played Demon Souls, the remake, and then got Dark Souls 3, and then Sekiro, and then Dark Souls 2. And I played all of Demon Souls, but I have not, and I beat Demon Souls, and then I have played but not beaten Dark Souls 3, Dark Souls 2, and Sekiro. Right, like most recently, I've been playing Sekiro. The Japanese fantasy setting is way more up my alley, and it's got samurai and ninja and stuff, and so like I like that. That is more that that aesthetic or subgenre is kind of more interesting to me than another European dark fantasy. Though these games are interesting because they are European dark fantasy as interpreted and presented by a Japanese creative group, rather than European material conveyed by Europeans or people of, dominantly European descent. Um, Me making a game about knights and wizards and like gothic European castles is very different than what FromSoft does. It would necessarily be different, and so that part is interesting. Um, and so we've played all these, and then Elden Ring is coming in February, and Elden Ring will be the first time one of these games comes out after Meg and I have gotten into Souls games or Soulsborne games. And that I think is going to be a really interesting experience because people talk about the Souls games being really social because you can do summons and invades and people like piece together gaming masochists. Well, the so I came to understand how to contextualize that masochism and get why people talk about the Souls games being really good for them because of how they respond to the game design through developing a certain type of resilience, a certain type of determination, and then getting that rush of triumph and exhilaration when you overcome something that has been incredibly difficult. I don't know that I'm like as high on the Soulsborne games are the greatest games of ever. Like, there's people who are like gigantic Souls stands, and I don't know that I'm anywhere in that territory, but I've come to appreciate them. I think they do a specific thing very well, or some specific things, and I'm curious to see what this next version looks like in terms of like iterating on what they've done across these other games. And hi, thank you for coming by, Lord Lothar. I hope you're feeling better compared to earlier this week and getting to enjoy the weekend. So yeah, like getting into the Souls games and specifically doing that with Meg has been a really fun part of the last year and a half. Um, yeah, I think there's cell shaded and classic Viking art styles. That could be really interesting. Have you checked out the Banner Saga original? I believe Arv played all three games on stream, but that one it's more like Ralph Bakshi animation style art, which may be up your alley. But maybe that's kind of the source you were pulling on and talking about what you would have liked from Valheim. Um, so yeah, like I'm digging Sekiro, da 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 da, and like other stuff this year that's been really good for me has just been like streaming, and before streaming, being on other streams, specifically doing speculate with um, the Rising Tides and the Kids Are Asleep and Arvin Alaron and the other folks that are in the Strange Friends crew, and then also the people who played Rebel Crown with us. So Dongwon Song and Alex Axe slash who publishes as Alex Wells as well. Um, yeah, so having a regular game, like I have home games that I play, there are also regular games, and those are really nice. But the specific fun of being in the Strange Friends group, playing the Case of the Cindered Seal. I'm going to get to Bag of Giving in just a moment. Yes, Trivity Maths. Um, and especially because both of those games wrapped this year, and like Splendor and Shadow, the Rebel Crown game, started this year and then wrapped this year. So it's a good 2021 thing to think about. It's a big creative project of mine over the course of the year because I was GMing. Um, yeah, I think we are seeing more games from elsewhere in the world versus just European stuff or like North American, specifically US and Canadian stuff. And so that's really fun. And Vikings are just popular. So people are going to keep making Viking games, but people will not only make Viking games, and we can find stuff that has different influences and sources. And that's really nice. So Kiss the Cindered Seal was fun for me because Brandon's the Rising Tides GMing style is unlike a lot of GMs that I have had a lot of experience with, and I came to appreciate the way that Brandon runs games in terms of really focusing on like deep emotion and characterization and like throwing curveballs at people from a bunch of different directions and the fun of getting to know people better by playing a game together with them. And I knew both Brandon and Valerie, the Rising Tides and the Kids Are Asleep from like being colleagues in the field. But like I knew Brandon a bit better than Valerie, but I wouldn't say I was necessarily close friends with either of them um, before Siddered Seal started. And then I knew Yoi and Iori only the tiniest bit. And now they're some of my best friends in the internet. And because of the way that the world is, they're just like the people that I talk to among the most frequently. And I'm very grateful to have them in my life. Um, and getting to tell stories via Speculate has been a wonderful part of my year. And I've gotten to expand on kind of actual play in a performance perspective, like in a performing mode by co-starting Bag of Giving with Brandon. And I believe, do I have a Bag of Giving? Is it Bag? I don't remember. I should have a Bag of Giving command. I'll make sure to add that. Brandon somehow takes grimdark dystopia and makes a fun, exciting romp through our collective. Yeah. Very good. So Bag of Giving, is it a .com or a .org? It is a .com. Okay, great. So I'm just going to throw that in there for anyone who doesn't already know it. Bag of Giving is a charity TTRPG stream series that I started along with Brandon Crilly. Brandon is really the main point person, and I help out wherever I can, but I want to make sure that people give Brandon credit, because Brandon came to me with this idea and then we developed it together, and Brandon has been point on a lot of things. And so I got to run one of the games, and then I was in the audience for one of the other ones, and the people the players for the Court of Blades game that I did were absolutely amazing and totally blew me away. Yeah, we do have that command on Arv's channel. That is what I was thinking of. So I'll just need to add that here. I might just copy most of that language. Yeah, we played the Fall of Magic, but didn't get all the way through it. And I think we're going to try to do another Fall of Magic game at some point. And then I ran the game of Court of Blades. And then this coming, when is it? I guess it's in just over a week. On January 9th, Brandon is going to GM a one-shot of Nightfell, which is like a dark fantasy 5e 5e compatible setting. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm not playing in it. I just get to be in the audience. And then we've got games scheduled for the next few months after that. And I've actually got a meeting on Monday with Brandon Crilly and someone else in terms of working out scheduling stuff for that. So stay tuned. Yeah, it is nice to be able to be in the audience for actual play, because that it reminds me what it is to be in the audience, so that when I'm a performer, I can keep in mind what people in the audience may be looking for or hoping for, in terms of what do I look for when I'm the audience, and then what might people be looking for when I'm performing. So that's really nice. I did get to go and do some book events, but in town. The Ivy Bookshop here in Baltimore moved to a new location last year, I guess, and they have outdoor space. And so they have a rear covered porch, and that made it way easier to do events during the pandemic and for everybody to still be safe. So, events where we'd have masked audience, social distancing for anybody who wasn't masked. And the shop did a really good job of taking care of the authors and the readers who were coming to do events while still being able to do events, from stuff that they organized directly to hosting Charm City Spec, which is a science fiction fantasy reading series that some friends of mine run in Baltimore. And thank you for copying that over, Triffity Metz. So that's, again, bagofgiving.com. You can find more information. And as the thing in text says, we also do giveaways. So you donate to the charity that we pick, or other charities kind of in the same vein. And then you send an email that says, I donated this much to these people, and here's that receipt. And, don't dox yourself in terms of your address and your credit card number or whatever. And then those donations get you a number of entries, depending on the size of the donation, to various giveaways of books and digital stuff and other things. And so I think there's going to be some new giveaways for the stream in January so you should look for that. Um, I should be able to host our stream on the 9th so that anybody who watches my streams but isn't necessarily watching Arv's should be able to find about it. I'll definitely talk about it on Patreon and Twitter and so on and so forth. So you'll have opportunities to hear about that leading into when it happens on the 9th. So yeah, that kind of gets into another very big important thing for me this year, but that's much newer, which is like streaming regularly here, because I kind of resurrected the channel in October. Would have been October, not late, maybe very late September, but I think October. And so it's really only been 3.5 months, and it feels like longer because it has become a really lovely part of my weekly schedule. It helps kind of sustain and solidify the rhythm of my week, to know, okay, I'm streaming today or I'm streaming in a couple of days, and having that like twice a week cadence that lets me see people regularly without necessarily taking up as much time while I continue to like work on my writing, even though writing has been very hard because I'm revising, and revising is hard, and there's a pandemic, so I don't get to see people, and the book I'm working on is especially hard because it's really ambitious. So having another part of my like creative professional life that is sharing and talking about games with y'all, and the streaming with Speculate. But this is just me circling around to being very grateful to all of y'all who are watching, and the folks who hang out and talk in chat, and make this experience the wonderful, heartwarming, life-affirming, mental health supporting thing that it has become. Yeah, writing is hard. It's good to have other outlets, totally. Yeah, thank you. And Happy New Year to you as well, Prince Justin. I figured kind of wrapping on the feel-good vibes is pretty much the thing. Like, another big thing for me this year is working on the Genrenauts RPG. You can get a lot more about that by looking on my Patreon, because I've been sharing documents and like design diaries for Genrenauts there. I'm hoping not too long into 2022 to maybe share some stuff about the Genrenauts RPG publicly, whether that is like running a public playtest or just talking about it more broadly, like on stream here, running a game here or something like that. Because I think the material's in the position to be able to start sharing it a little bit more broadly. But even as I do that, you're still gonna see more and hear more about it on Patreon. So again, that's another plug for Patreon. Many of y'all who are here are already supporters of my Patreon, so I'm very grateful for that. Yeah, thank you so much, Tom. I'm blessed to have wonderful friends and colleagues whose stuff I get to shout out, and it's fun to see that being appreciated by others, which is lovely. So we are at almost 3 o'clock. I think I'll probably vamp for another couple minutes so that then we can raid the Rising Tides, if that timing does line up. But again, thank you to everybody who came by to hang out and chat as I talked about stuff of the year. We have successfully created the first annual SOTYS, aka Stuff of the Year. It's either the SOTYS as the award or SOTYS because Stuff of the Year stream, and why can't it be both? I don't have little actual award things to give out because, again, life in a pandemic, and it would be kind of silly to like send a little thing to big international media companies. Maybe sending stuff to people who are already colleagues would be pretty fun. I mean, there is not a reason. Why not both is a good question. In future years, there may be SOTYS. I just have to figure out what funny thing I should do, because I have friends who have 3D printers. And so if I can come up with, or realistically, if I can commission a pattern for people to then 3D print, then maybe there could be actual SOTYS. Now, branding wise, I did not do a great job of making those be something that then promotes the channel or my writing. So the SOTYS presented by twitch.tv/turbotango, aka Michael R. Underwood, is a little bit of a mouthful, but I talk fast, so maybe it's fine. Dollar store trophies and milk chocolate $1 million bills. I mean, it's very funny. It might be get me on weird lists. Not that I'm probably already on all the weird lists because writer and Googling. So such is life. All right, so what I'm going to do is try to shout out everybody who is here in chat. So thank you very much to Arudinal, to The Kids Are Asleep, to Triffity Mats, to Tom As Is, to The Rising Tides, to... who else is here? I know Chen Razi came by, Lord Lothar, Prince Justin, got Triffity Mats, I believe already, but I will make sure to do so. And everyone who lurks. I know we had Echo Alpha come by a couple days ago and threw out some threw me some subscriptions, for which I'm very grateful. And yeah, I think that is everybody. So that's everyone who I can find on the scroll. But I think we've had enough chat that the top of my scroll has gone away. As indicated, or if you weren't here on Wednesday, the stream is now a Twitch affiliate, which happened faster than I was expecting. So you can subscribe to this channel if you would like. If you are a Amazon Prime member, you have a Twitch Prime subscription every month that you can basically get on for somebody for free, and then you have to renew it every month if you're doing Twitch Prime. And there are many lovely channels that are worth your support. If you would like to use that Twitch Prime subscription here, I would be very grateful and happy to have your support. I am not planning on doing much with ads on this channel at this point, because I don't think this is going to become a major revenue stream for me. If the stream becomes way more popular than I'm expecting, then maybe it will, and maybe it will make sense for me to revisit any of that, but probably not right now. I have been looking at some options for commissioning emotes, because that's also something that I can get that we will always forget to renew. Yes, that has been my experience with Twitch Prime subs. I almost always use that sub at Arv's channel and will forget. There's a very good chance that I forget by like 2, 3 to 10 days, depending on the rhythm of my life. But yeah, we have subs and bits here. I'm going to commission some emotes, try to figure out other things that I can do that are not too much of a author work lift in terms of spending time on things that are not writing or streaming or podcasting, while still coming up with some fun stuff to celebrate and thank people who do support the channel financially. But you can, just being here and hanging out is basically the most important thing at this point. Being here and lurking, being here and chatting. Like I said, you can watch any of these things when they show up on YouTube at youtube.com/c/Mike Underwood. Yeah, I think that bathroom break during ads is not a terrible idea. I would have to just make sure that I could control the timing of when that happens, because honestly, a 3-minute break every hour is probably good for my health, in terms of like getting up and stretching and things like that. So I'll think about those things. The affiliate email came on Wednesday morning, and that's only a couple of days ago now. So I still want to spend some time thinking through the options, and that anything I do, I want to be good about communicating with y'all so you know what their expectations are going to be. Thank you very much to Tom As Is for the Twitch Prime subscription. Yeah, sit way too much. Hence Treadmill desk, as we discussed earlier. So yeah, I'm going to pull up another Twitch panel so I can see whether Brandon has. And Rudenel subscribed at tier 1. Hooray! My watch keeps telling me to stand, and I keep not. Yeah, it really was the treadmill desk that helped me develop that that habit. Also, I drink a lot of water and therefore have to use the restroom. And like, I guess sort of that's an adaptive thing. I don't necessarily recommend that as the way to like get up and not be sitting all the time. It's just how I've ended up doing it. Well, maybe we'll figure out some way to encourage low lift uh, health behaviors for one another in um, with the Strange Fringe stuff. My first hype train. Hype train means multiple people are subscribing and or sending bits. I think that's a thing. There are no exclusive emotes right now. It says you'll have a limited time. Right now, the exclusive emote is a GIF of me being happy and joyful and grateful that will not be turned into an emote just yet, but there will be emotes. I just want to make sure to be really clear about. Oh my goodness. And so now we do the thing where I'm grateful and embarrassed because people are doing lots of subs and gift subs. So Arudnell gifted 5 subs to the Rising Tides, John Harper, The Kids Are Asleep, Maldarian, and Bufaston. So thank you so much, Arudnell, for being an amazing supporter of the channel and for getting this first hype train up to level 3, which is like, that's good. I think hype trains can go up to like level 4 or 5, maybe. And Lord Lothar. See, like the funny thing with all these people who I know is I have their actual name in my head, and then there's their stream name that's on here. And I know that I should use the stream name much or most of the time so that y'all know who I'm talking about. But then I have the actual name in my head. So I see Lord Lothar, and the Lord part is short enough, and we were in the SCA together, so that my brain just hears Lothar. And so that's a little bit of an insight into the way that I try to process the kind of cross signals of knowing the everyday / IRL / real names of people who are here in Twitch chat with Twitch names that are different. So that's that. So the Rising Tides, if you're going to start streaming, I would invite you to do that so that I can raid the channel and send folks over there. Should anyone be so inclined. That is the Rising Tides, aka Brandon O'Brien, who was the GM of The Case of the Cindered Seal and is one of the co-hosts of Speculate. And I'm going to do Speculate here real quick. If you don't already know about Speculate, there's some information there. It is a fun actual play show that I do with my colleagues in the science fiction and fantasy world. Let me... Okay, looks like... Huh. Yeah, my Twitch, I guess my followed channels thing didn't refresh right, and so it wasn't showing the Rising Tides there. So yes, I am indeed streaming, says the Rising Tides. So I'm going to get ready to do the raid to send people over to there, and I want to say again, thank you so much to everybody who came by today and made this a really fun experience talking about things I enjoyed in the year and hearing from y'all about the stuff that you enjoyed and talking stuff through. It's a good, like, in lieu of getting to go to like a New Year's Eve party, doing something like this and talking with people, like this is my New Year's Eve party, and that's really fun because last year I just mostly didn't do anything, and this is a pretty good way of getting to process some of those feelings and share some of that joy. And yeah, thank you so much again to everybody who subscribed today. That was really amazing. And now we are going to raid the Rising Tides so you can hear Brandon talk about Kohaku. So that's that. I will stream again on Sunday, and I will see you then, if not earlier. And now let's go raid the Rising Tides. We go! Did that not go? Do the thing. Okay, now it says now we should be able to do the thing. So yeah, you can go over there. Okay, and now I stop my side, right? I think that's how this works.